Welcome guests to our WhyTry webinar. Welcome back. We've been a few weeks off, and I'm really excited to be back together with you all. Just a very brief introduction for those that are new. I know we've got some familiar faces on here, but for those that are joining us for our first time, so this is my name's Jason Johnson, and I represent the WhyTry organization. We've been around for about 20 years, and we kind of specialize in resilience and teaching social emotional skills, critical life skills. And we started doing this webinar series right at the beginning of the pandemic there in 2020, and it really turned into I think a great community where we've had a lot of incredible guests on that have shared a lot of great ideas, shared a ton of strategies, and it's really kind of taken on a life of its own. So if you're coming back, welcome back. We're excited to be back. We took a couple weeks off. We've had some kind of really crazy busy times organizationally. And we're thrilled to be able to be back together. And we're hoping to put together a schedule where these will carry through the end of the year on a fairly regular basis. We've been able to bring in a ton of guests. We have previous recordings of these available on our website, so you can check that out, whytry.org, on your own time and take a look at some of the previous topics we've addressed. But today I'm really excited. We're kind of going back full circle to where it all began with these, both for our organization and on this webinar series. So today we're going to be talking about resilience, and specifically some ideas for teaching resilience and addressing emotional needs of your students. And we're thrilled to have an expert on resilience with us today. We've got Mr. Christian Moore, who is the founder of the WhyTry organization. He's kind of the reason we're here organizationally, but he's also beyond founding the WhyTry organization. He's an LCSW, a social worker, a therapist, done some incredible community work locally, and then he's also done some incredible work nationally around the topic of resilience for the last 20 years. So we really do have a legitimate resilience expert in the house with us. And this is fun for me personally because Christian's a great friend, and it was he and I on the very first webinars when we started these over a year ago. So it's kind of fun to come full circle on this. And after we get started, I'm going to let Christian introduce himself here more formally in a minute. By the way, author of the Resilience Breakthrough book, which I'm sure he'll mention. Let's see, organizationally, we're in about 30,000 different organizations throughout the country and throughout the world. And it's just been an incredible ride. So Christian, welcome. We're thrilled to have you.
Nice to be here.
My name is Jason Johnson. Historically, I serve as kind of the moderator on these. I don't plan on really moderating too much today. I'm going to throw it over to Christian and just let Christian cook and really do what he's good at. And I think you're all in for a treat. If you haven't heard him present before, he's got some great information on the topic of resilience. And if you have, I think he's got some nice updated, I think, views on this topic that we've really been pushing for decades now. So Christian, with that, I'm going to throw it over to you and go ahead and get us started on this important topic. By the way, my background is I'm a school psych. I've been with the WhyTry organization about 6 years ago. If you've been through a WhyTry training, decent chance you've seen me or you've seen me on the previous webinars. I'm going to get out of the way now, Christian. It's all you.
All right. Hey, thank you. Now, Jason, you're seeing my screen, right? I'm live.
Yep, you're all good.
All right. The social work side has always been easy for me for the last, 25 years. It's the technology it's always my challenge, but I have incredible people to help me. I want to say first, I'm honored to be on here with Jason. Jason is someone who has taught me a tremendous amount about resilience, and Jason's the real deal. I've personally seen him impact literally tens of thousands of kids across this country. He's one of our main trainers, and Jason's the real deal. So it's great to be on here with Jason. It's so fun to talk to you all about my favorite topic, resilience. I wrote the book, The Resilience Breakthrough, about, I don't know, probably 3 years before COVID hit. And I had no idea what it was going to be like talking about resilience once COVID hit, and during the, we're still in the middle of COVID, and then just what has happened in this country around racial issues, all the different social justice work that's happening, and all the different things. I had no idea what it was going to be like, and it's just been incredible experiences speaking about resilience. I know resilience is something that not just people in education are hungry for, but this country. And it's been a fascinating experience, and just a life-changing experience for me sharing resilience. So again, very excited to share with you and give you some updates on where we are with the whole resilience process. People often ask me, they'll say, what's the number one thing a person has to have to be resilient? If you had to put resilience into one word, what's the key ingredient to being resilient? And what I always point out is that resilience is the ability to bounce back. We're never resilient. We don't bounce back until we have something to bounce back from. So the number one thing, the key ingredient to resilience is suffering. And I know that doesn't sound very hopeful or very motivational, but if this was a workshop on success, I would probably talk about some other topics. But today, I'm not going to be talking about success. I'm going to be talking about taking rock bottom moments, taking pain and suffering and thriving. And the key to being able to do that, we know, is, again, having something to bounce back from. And we know there is no shortage of suffering right now on planet Earth. I also want to mention, there's external suffering we see going on in the world, but we all know the greatest battle we all fight is between our ears, is that internal battle that we fight. That's the big one. And when we have internal resilience, it makes a huge difference. And what I ended up focusing my book on, I had read lots of books that talked about the attributes of resilience, hard work, determination. But I wanted to answer that internal battle we all fight. Where does resilience come from within? And that's what we'll be focusing on quite a bit today. But I want to start out by sharing with you all a little bit about my own resilience journey and how I became so interested in the subject matter. Those that know me pretty well know resilience was kind of handed to me on a silver platter because of the challenges I had at home, at school, with peers. Because of those challenges, I attended the University of Adversity. And when you attend the University of Adversity, you learn resilience really, really early. I'm raising 2 boys right now, and I'm a little worried, some of the resilience that I had to grow up with, the resilience that I had to tap into. And so that kind of gave me a resilience advantage. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about my home life. And because of time, I'm going to probably give you a Reader's Digest version of these 3 environments. But first, my home life, I grew up in between DC and Baltimore in a family of 12 kids, 5 brothers, 6 sisters. My mom had something called social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder. My mom had a fear of leaving the house. You have to leave the house to go get food. So there wasn't a lot of food to eat in my house growing up. There's usually pickles, olives, and tuna fish. I'm going to write a cookbook one day, 101 ways how to eat those 3 things. Next person to tell you a little bit about is my dad. He's one of the most interesting people in the world. He's very intelligent, graduated from high school 2 years early. Those that know me know I was a special education student all the way through school. I was in special ed. I was diagnosed with ADHD, conduct disorder as a child. But my dad, who raised me, he graduated from high school 2 years early, went to work for the U.S. Postal Service sorting mail. The U.S. Postal Service could tell he had a tremendous talent. You could say to him 5,898 times 10,852, and he could instantly rattle that off the top of his head. If you ever seen the movie Rain Man or Beautiful Mind, you've met my dad. And so my dad, on his 18th birthday, 2 gentlemen pulled up in front of the U.S. Postal Service and drove him to a place called Fort Meade, Maryland. On Fort Meade, Maryland, there's a place called NSA, the National Security Agency. And my dad became a GS-16 code breaker. That's the highest level spy, the highest level cryptanalyst that you can become. I'm going to write a book one day, Son of Spy. But I don't know if you've ever been around a genius before. They usually lack 2 things, common sense and social skills. So I realize now, he's autistic. So I have an autistic dad. A mom with social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder. As a child, again, I was diagnosed with ADHD, conduct disorder, and severe learning disabilities. We're under one roof of a house with 11 other siblings with similar issues. So you can imagine how important reading, writing, and arithmetic was to me. Because of my parents' mental health issues, I was a street kid. I could hang out till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on a school night. Most kids my age had to go into the house pretty early. So I'd run around with the older kids. The older kids introduced me to the urban pharmaceutical industry. They would put all the drugs on me because I was like, cute little white kid with curly hair and dimples. And so they taught me, look, if the police come towards us, you run towards the police. We're going to run the opposite direction. And so they would put all the drugs on me because they knew I wasn't going to be checked. And so I'd run towards the police. The police would hand me Washington football team cards and take me home. The police never checked me. So by the time I was 7 years old, I became highly aware of social injustice issues in the United States. It's definitely what inspired me to become a social worker and do this work we're doing around the world right now. Well, one night I'm out late at night, a car pulls up, the windows on the car slowly roll down. I take off to run and I hear a voice, and the voice I hear is the voice of this woman right here who I endearingly call Mama Jackson. And I know several of you are familiar with her. Figure out who I am in the picture. I'm there. I'm there on the left is my buddy Sean on the right. I can only hang out with Sean till 5, 6 o'clock at night because Mama Jackson did what all good moms know: who your children hang out with is going to have a tremendous impact on their future. She sees me out there in the middle of the night. She knows what I'm out there doing. And she's like, look, Christian, don't you ever set foot on our property. I'm going to call the school tomorrow. I'm going to make sure you're not in any of Sean's classes. And I remember thinking to myself, dang, I know I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. I can never go to school with him ever again. Well, luckily, Sean started explaining to his mom the reality of my home life. He's like, look, Mom, I go over to Christian's house. It's a strange house. They've been in this house for, like 10 years. They have no pictures up on the wall. There's a lot of yelling, fighting, hitting. I'd open up the refrigerator 5,000 times, after school, hoping that something would magically appear in the refrigerator. When nothing would appear in the refrigerator, I start punching holes in the wall, fighting with my siblings and stuff. Depending where my mom's mental health was, she'd wash my sheets for me every single night. So I never had to sleep in the same sheets twice. My wife, Wendy, has not caught the vision of that. She makes me sleep in the same sheets more than one night. She actually heard me say this at a conference a while ago to like 1,200 people. She's like, you can wash your own damn sheets. So I have to represent the wife there. But anyways, Sean explains this craziness, this bizarreness to his mom. And a couple of days later, I'm walking to school. And Mama Jackson comes flying out of her house in this blue bathrobe. And she's like, I'll tell you what, Christian, if you'll start going to school every day, I want to see report cards. If you start answering to me, you can come eat in our house anytime you want. Now, Mama Jackson's a seriously, seriously good cook. That's the real reason why I'm in top physical condition right now. So it's pretty much an informal foster care situation. She took over and helped raise me. Well, I wish I had time to tell you the whole story, but basically she helped give me the tools to graduate from college with a 6th grade math level, a 7th grade reading and writing level. So as you can see, I was very, very blessed to have her come into my life. I was the first one in my family to go to college, graduate from college. When I graduated, no one in my immediate family came to my graduation, but Mama Jackson got on an airplane, flew 2,000 miles across the United States, was sitting on the 10th row when they handed me my MSW. When I saw her sitting in that audience, I thought to myself, before I'm 6 feet under, I'm going to make sure every child in America has access to the social and emotional education she gave me. And that started to become part of the start of WhyTry. A long story short, 20 some years later, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Virgil Wood, who helped plan the march on Washington with Dr. King, learned about Mama Jackson, read my book, The Resilience Breakthrough. And here's a picture of Dr. Virgil Wood to the left of Dr. King there in the march with the glasses on there. And, he read my book, learned about me, learned about Mama Jackson, and just said, look, Christian, you never would have had this opportunity in life had Mama Jackson not come into your life. And about 2 years ago, Mama Jackson got the National Rosa Parks Award outside of Washington, D.C. there. So you can see Dr. Wood and Mama Jackson. So that was one of the definitely probably one of the biggest highlights of my life, seeing her honored by a civil rights icon for her helping me. And Mama Jackson has done a lot of community work over the years, helping kids. And so just amazing woman. And again, incredible to see her honored, and for me to be mentored by both of these incredible people have been one of the most amazing highlights of my life. So you can see I have a huge debt to pay with incredible people that have taught me amazing things in life. Well, a long story short, a professor comes to me in school and says, look, Christian, how did you make it through college with your background, with your learning differences? So I wrote down, pull it up here. That kind of became the start of WhyTry. I wrote down, a few principles on a piece of paper, and I just kind of took everything in mental health, made it visual. Then, of course, those are familiar with WhyTry know we reinforce these metaphors with music, physical activities, and so on. Well, people started coming to me and saying, look, Christian, we've been using your WhyTry program for 10 years or so. Kids understand the visual metaphors, the music, the physical activities, but does the inner motivation come from to apply these social and emotional skills? And that was one of the toughest questions I got. I would just say, I speak at over 150 conferences a year, and I would say, well, all you can do is teach kids life skills. What works with one child isn't going to work with another student. Mental health is a soft science. And I would just say, hey, all we can do is teach these life skills. And at the end of the day, some kids are going to cling to these, and it's going to have a huge impact on them thriving. But there's no magic silver bullet in dealing with, an intervention or a tool to really solve these problems. And I said this at many conferences. Then there was this lady who literally changed my life. This little Polynesian lady comes up to me and says, Christian, why don't you stop and think about, where does resilience come from? Where does it come from internally? And I'm like, man, that's a hard thing to figure out. And imagine, we lived in a world where we had a prescription for resilience. We knew right where the inner motivation came from to put one foot in front of another. And I just remember arguing with her and saying, there's no way we'll come up with that. And she said, why don't you stop and think about, where does resilience come from internally? And again, I had read lots of books on resilience that talked about the attributes, hard work, determination, perseverance. Well, I was talking to a bunch of other therapists about this, and they said, what we should do is pay attention to people who have high trauma and are thriving. I was doing work from Detroit to Baltimore to Los Angeles, and I kept running into kids whose mom's in prison, dad's an alcoholic, their older brother maybe abused them, they're dealing with community violence, they're dealing with tremendous challenges. I remember doing some work in Chicago and in Baltimore and stuff. And I remember just thinking to myself, why don't we pay attention to people with high trauma who are thriving? And most mental health workers like myself, we work with people who have high trauma and they're hurting themselves and others, right? That most people that are coming to my office, especially when I work with students, these are kids in crisis, and they're kind of in a rock bottom situation. So that's what most mental health workers, are going to spend 90% of the time working with. But I started realizing there is this other population who have, again, tremendous trauma and are thriving. And it took several years, but we identified, what are they tapping into? And we saw 4 things pop up over and over again, which I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about, something called relational resilience, street resilience, resource, and rock bottom resilience, which I'll get into in a few minutes. So again, the question is, can we come up with literally a prescription for resilience? Now, I'm going to say something pretty bold. In the next 30 minutes here or so, I'm going to give you the prescription for resilience. And if someone said to me, hey, I'm going to teach you the prescription for resilience, I would have turned on every recording device, ran to the front of the room, and just went crazy, because I cannot think of anything more important than to know exactly where the inner motivation comes from to put one foot in front of another. Resilience takes place in the striving. It's an effort effect. Resilience isn't a destination. Like, I've never reached resilience. I wrote a book about resilience. I'm an expert on resilience, but I'm telling you, resilience, 99% of it takes place in a pushing through, in a striving. Resilience is an effort effect. And so what I want to do is kind of take you on a little bit of a journey, kind of a formula on where this resilience is born from within. So this might as I jump into the resilience in depth here, this might sound a little bit morbid, but if I was going to pass away tomorrow and someone said to me, what's the last advice you would give your two kids, Cooper and Carson? I would tell them that the second most powerful thing I've ever learned is the ability to see your problem, to see the opposition, the suffering as your best friend. When I went to publish the book, I wanted to title the book Resilience, the Second Greatest Principle in the World. And Greenleaf, the publisher, kind of laughed at me. They said, Christian, in America, nobody cares what the second greatest principle is. In America, they care about what? Number one, right? What's the greatest principle? What's the most important thing in the world? So according to me, whatever that means, Christian, literally, I'm not being funny or facetious when I say this, that literally the second most powerful thing anybody's ever taught me is to see my suffering, to see my challenge as my best friend. I remember one of the first times I learned this was Mama Jackson would pick me up in the morning when I was missing lots of school, and she'd have this warm plate with food on it covered in tinfoil. And she'd sit out in front of my elementary school and she would say, look, Christian, I can't get rid of your learning disabilities. I can't get rid of some of these behavioral issues you're dealing with. I can't get rid of your parents' divorce, some of the fighting in your house, some of the abuse you've dealt with. I can stop current abuse from happening, but I cannot get rid of some of the past challenges you had. And I remember her just saying, look, I can't get rid of the challenges at school, and I know you're angry, but you have to use this anger as a reason to turn in your homework, stay in school, make better decisions. She was showing me how to create a productive outcome within the suffering that I was dealing with, because she couldn't get rid of those challenges again in those three main environments of home, school, and peers. And again, that's the second most powerful thing anybody's ever taught me, is that there's no law in the universe that says you cannot take suffering and create a productive outcome with it. You know, we all have the ability to use that literally as a fuel source. And I'm going to get to the specifics on how to do that, but I just want to really emphasize why I really believe resilience is the second most powerful thing a person can learn. And I'm sure everybody out there is thinking, okay, that's great, but what's the most important thing? If resilience is the second greatest principle, what's the greatest principle in the world? And this probably won't shock anybody. The Beatles got it right, I guess, when they said, all we need is love, you know. And there was a few teachers before the Beatles that taught we needed love, that love is the most powerful principle. But the love I have for my two kids, Cooper and Carson, my wife, Wendy, when I feel like shutting down or giving up, what causes me to really push through and not give up is that love, that connection that I have for Mama Jackson, for the people in my life that believe in me. And, you know, we all know there's two types of love in this world, right? We have conditional love and unconditional love. You know, in this world, a lot of times, you know, to be conditional opens up a lot of doors for us. You know, as a business owner, I have to be conditional. If my employees don't do A, B, or C, I might have to fire them. I might have to let them go, because it's a conditional relationship. It's predicated on productivity and performance and making a difference. You know, I know I was fired for several jobs. Probably doesn't surprise you with my conduct disorder, but those situations, you know, there wasn't a lot of people being unconditional with me. But in the world of resilience, again, if this was a workshop on success, I would emphasize conditional love, because if you want money, status, power, and control over another human being, create conditional situations, conditional love. But if you want to help someone who's rock bottom, someone who's dealing with opposition, crisis, difficulty, create an unconditional situation. Let people know they have value and worth, whether they succeed or whether they fail. Those are familiar with WhyTry. I know we teach something called surrendering the one-up relationship. And that just, to surrender the one-up is to let a child know they have value and worth, whether they succeed or whether they fail. And so several years ago, when I started doing this research, looking at, you know, what really causes someone to not give up, they all talked about people who knew their weaknesses and they knew their strengths, but they treated them the same. I remember Mama Jackson saying to me for years, hey, Christian, so if you ever end up on death row, the only person that's going to visit, I know that's extreme, but she would say, if you ever are on death row, I will be there for you. I will show up. There is nothing you can do that I'm not going to show you that love. And, you know, us being raised in the African-American community, being white and being exposed to that level of unconditional love, where it's not predicated upon status or success, that was a major, major blessing in my life. And so again, unconditional love is so powerful. Just a little challenge I'll give to you. If you write down on a piece of paper, the 10 people you spend most of your time with, if 6 or more of those people are unconditional, you're less likely to have depression, anxiety, less fear. If 6 or more of those relationships out of 10 are conditional, I'll love you if ... I'll love you if you have my same views, beliefs, background, culture. That's conditional love. And if 6 or more of the relationships in your life are only there if under conditional situations, again, you're much more likely to have depression, anxiety, fear, frustration. So at 50 years old, anybody I consistently hang out with, they're usually people who are unconditional, because I realize I'm much more likely to thrive in an unconditional environment versus a conditional environment. So one thing I'm proud of is in thousands of school systems across this country, we're teaching the educators on how to surrender this one-up relationship, how to make sure that children and families feel they have tremendous value and worth, whether they succeed or whether they fail. And again, that's that kind of that surrendering the one-up principle that is really the bread and butter. It's really the secret sauce that makes WhyTry work, that makes our resilience work. Until we have that unconditional relationship, you're only going to get so far in the change process. So the first thing you have to be resilient, we know we have to have suffering. The second thing we know is the more unconditional love you're around, you're much more likely to push through and not give up. And then the third thing I want to talk a little bit about is a concept called flipping the switch. All of us have a resilience switch inside of us. And that, I refer to it as a resilience switch, is when you have the ability to say to yourself, how do I use this opposition? How do I use this suffering as my best friend? You literally enter into the world of resilience. It's a question you have to ask yourself, and that's literally the gateway to resilience. So it's like a gas pump. If you're going to access the fuel in this gas tank, you got to flip the switch. And so they did a 20-year longitudinal study in Kauai called the Kauai Resilience Project. They want to know, 2 kids grew up in the same home, the same neighborhood, the same background. One kid makes it out, the other kid doesn't make it. What's the X factor? Well, the ability to see your problem or the opposition as a fuel source, as your best friend, they found was one of the biggest things that influenced it. But what we started realizing was when people are highly resilient, they're literally saying to themselves, how do I use this pain? They literally flip the switch, and many people are not even aware that they have this switch. To be honest, it wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I really realized that I could flip this switch. When I started traveling all the time, I started reading all these biographies, and I kept seeing example after example of people flipping the switch. I remember the first time I was reading a book about Christopher Reeves, who played Superman. He was the opposite of me. He was this incredible Renaissance guy. He was tall, dark, handsome, talented. He rode horses. He played Superman in Hollywood. He was in all these films. He was a great hiker, rock climber. He could do pretty much anything. And everybody knows the story. He gets thrown off the horse. He's paralyzed. And he says to his wife, I want to commit suicide. I was at the top of the world. I'm rock bottom now. I can't be here for the kids. I won't be able to be here for you like I want to be. I don't want to keep living. And she negotiates with Christopher and says, look, just stay alive for a little bit. Hang in there. Stay alive for me, the kids. Let's see if you can make a difference in the paralysis community. And we know the rest of the story. Christopher flips the switch, and he takes the pain, the suffering, and he puts it into his rehab and makes a huge difference, inspires basically the whole world. Nelson Mandela took 27 years of being in a prison camp. He took the pain, the suffering of that, and created reconciliation in South Africa. Oprah was severely emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused. I remember reading in her book how she took that pain and said, I'm going to make a huge difference in this world. So I started realizing, wait a minute, there's no law in the universe that says you cannot take depression, anxiety, fear, frustration, guilt, anger, and create a productive outcome with it. A lot of it is just the awareness that you can flip the switch. Again, it wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I even knew I had this switch to flip. And we're having an amazing time. Even the last few years, I've seen literally thousands of kids by 3rd grade. Will help them understand that the minute you feel angry, sad, or nervous, 1, there's nothing wrong with you. That's part of the human condition. And 2, you can use these intense emotions, sadness, hurt, anger, as a reason to turn in your homework, to be a better friend, to put one foot in front of another, to push through. Again, it just really comes down to that awareness. So it's one thing to tell a child, hey, I want you to maximize both your positive and negative emotions, but where does that inner motivation come from to do that? So one of the things that we teach to kind of start that process is I use a metaphor of a battery, a car battery. And I say, can you charge a battery with just a positive connection? And the students will say, no, a battery will not charge with just a positive connection. I'll say, can you charge a battery with a negative connection? And they'll say, no, you have to have the positive and the negative, of course, to create the fuel for that battery. And so, for example, if me being right here in this moment, speaking to y'all today about resilience, if it was dependent on these emotions on the left, happiness, peace, motivation, optimism, love, trust, and acceptance, I wouldn't be here talking to y'all today. I didn't grow up with a lot of those emotions. When you grow up with trauma, with abuse, with different challenges, you don't have a lot of those emotions on the left. Most of my childhood, when I look back, I was experiencing these emotions, anger, fear, frustration, sadness, regret, loneliness, depression. I'll be honest with you, at 50 years old, and it's probably because I spent almost my entire childhood with most of the emotions on the right, I still have challenges with all those emotions on the right-hand side at 50 years old and being an expert in this. Now, you have a huge advantage if you can maximize both your positive and negative emotions. I spent 8 years in college, $65,000 on my education being trained in something called positive psychology. What we say to ourselves is going to lead to our actions. It's going to lead to our behavior. So we just probably want to say positive things to ourselves. Now, again, if this was a workshop on motivation, if this was a workshop on success, I would only be talking to you about positive emotions. But my workshop today is not on success. It's on being rock bottom, having opposition, and having the ability to bounce back. And if you can tap into both your positive and negative emotions, you have twice the fuel source to bounce back. So think about it. If you have to wait for positive emotions to show up before you put one foot in front of another, you're actually at a massive resilience disadvantage. So you have twice the fuel source to bounce back from if you can tap into both your positive and negative emotions. And again, today, one of my favorite quotes, and it's going to literally say this on my tombstone: there's no law in the universe that says you cannot take negative emotions and create a productive outcome with them. And so, again, imagine by third grade, one, realizing there's nothing wrong with you if you have negative emotions. 100% of the planet, every day, we have somewhere between 40 to 60,000 different emotions during the day. And some of those emotions, of course, are going to be positive. Some of those emotions are going to be negative. And by the way, when I teach this on college campuses, a lot of times the professors in psychology will pull me aside and they'll say, Christian, we understand you work with children, so you're emphasizing positive and negative emotions. But remember, when you talk to people, let them know that the world of mental health, the world of psychology, doesn't really emphasize positive, negative emotions. They just emphasize that it's part of the human condition. We just have emotions. Some of those emotions tend to be more positive, more negative, but they're just emotional states. There's many reasons why emotions have been demonized in our history, but they're just emotional states. And so I got to represent the academic world there a little bit. But of course, I work with children, and it's really important that they understand that when they have a negative emotion, it's as normal as breathing. It's just the human condition. In a perfect world, I would want 80% of the kids I work with, I would want their emotions to be positive, and maybe 10, 20% of their emotions to be negative. But most youth and families I work with, they're dealing with trauma and crisis. 80% or 90% of their emotions will be negative. 10 to 20% of their emotions will be positive. So we're not going to get much. We're not going to have a lot of success in the change process if they do not know how to create a productive outcome with the negative emotions. They've got to know how to create that outcome with those emotions. I was teaching this a couple of years ago by the University of Iowa, and there's a bunch of professors in the humanities that were listening to me talk about positive, negative emotions. And they said, what's interesting is, they said, if you look at the greatest music, the greatest film, the greatest plays, the greatest comedians, it's basically people taking negative emotions and creating productive outcomes with it. Like you look at some of the greatest literature. Hemingway took heartbreak and he channeled it, those negative emotions of heartbreak and the pain of that. He created this incredible, writing. From Les Mis, the story of Les Mis, to Wicked, it's all channeling negative emotions. The greatest comedians, Picasso sees tens of thousands of his countrymen being killed during the War of Spain, and he channels that into this artwork. Now it's worth millions and millions of dollars. And he just talked about what inspired him was just taking the hurt of war and channeling it into his art. So from Picasso to Hemingway to the greatest plays, the greatest music, the greatest art. And the number one thing we talk about at a person's funeral is what do they do to channel the opposition in their lives in productive ways? That is the number one funeral talk, probably since the beginning of mankind. And so that's the power, but most people are only exposed to positive psychology. And so, in the world of success, I would only be talking to you about positive emotions. But my workshop, again, is on having suffering, pain, opposition, and creating a productive outcome with it. And when we study people who do that at the highest levels, they all use negative emotions as a tremendous fuel source. And again, you have twice the fuel to bounce back if you can tap into both positive and negative emotions. The other thing that's really powerful is you could also argue that negative emotions are the birthplace of being human. If you didn't mess up, make mistakes, have negative emotions, you would literally be like a robot, a machine. What makes us human is the fact that we're imperfect. It's literally the birthplace of humanity. And so it also, when you understand that, you can see your flaws, your failures, your weaknesses. When you lose your emotions, your temper is actually a strength. It's what's most special about you. Now, again, if you go to the extreme where you're hurting yourself or others, you might need to be, that needs to be put into check. Or, I have an anxiety disorder. Sometimes I'm on medication for anxiety because I'm not channeling my anxiety in productive ways. So again, if it's something where you're hurting yourself or others, you definitely need to get mental health resources, talk to a therapist like myself. But what we realize now in psychology is the ability to maximize both your positive and negative emotions gives you twice the fuel to thrive. So it's one thing to tell a person, we want you to maximize both your positive and negative emotions, but where does the inner motivation come from to do that? So this is the prescription for resilience. So the first place that resilience comes from within is something called relational resilience. This is a picture of my two boys, Cooper and Carson. If I never got invited to speak again, I would literally go work at 4 different fast food restaurants because they need me. I need them. That interdependence creates, that's kind of the birthplace of relational resilience. It's funny, I've been saying that for years, speaking across the country, and then COVID hit, and then I couldn't speak for almost like 8 months. And I was like, holy cow. And so, but I doubled down. I didn't give up. I reached out to several people to help me, and we were able to stay in business. And so what motivated me to do that is the responsibility I have for other people's lives, for my children, people I care about in my family, outside of my family. So your greatest motivation to not give up is the knowledge that others depend on you, that they need you and you need them. We know we're highly social creatures. We need that connection. It's not dependence, it's interdependence that's productive. You draw strength from the emotional support of others. You realize your greatest power comes from human connection. Mama Jackson was that relationship for me. One of my favorite examples is Dick and Rick Hoyt, who ran in over 240 triathlons together. When he became the legs for his son, it completely transformed his life here. If I had time, I'd play a video for you. It talks about, but I want to tell you what is at the end of this video. He says, something comes from his body to my body that motivated me. And in 2021, we know exactly what that is. That's that relational resilience. Harriet Tubman is a powerful, powerful example of relational resilience. We know she freed over 200 slaves on the Underground Railroad. The slaves would want to turn back around. They would see the lights coming towards them in the woods. They'd hear the dogs coming towards them. And the real story is I went to her museum a couple of years ago, in my Maryland history books where the Underground Railroad went. They never really told me the real story. But when I went to her museum, they explained that she actually had a shotgun, and she'd explain to them, if you turn back around, we're all going to get captured. So I'm going to have to shoot you first. And none of the slaves turned around. They continued to follow her. And we know she didn't lose any slaves there on the Underground Railroad. Why did she go to that extreme? It was that interdependence. She knew she needed them. They needed her. She's also one of my heroes. She's the grandmother of my profession, social work. Jane Addams is the mother of social work. But Harriet Tubman started the first retirement homes in Philadelphia for African Americans and did some of the first organized social work. So she is the grandmother of social work. You'll see soldiers coming home from war. They maybe lost an arm, a leg, a limb. I've sat next to many of these soldiers on flights. And oftentimes they'll say they want to go back. Do they want to go back for political reasons? Usually not. They usually want to go back because of camaraderie. It's that interdependence, the love for their fellow soldiers is often why they say they want to go re-engage. And that's been an interesting thing to learn. A couple of years ago, I was sitting next to a 4-star general on a flight, and I was talking to him about these 4 sources of resilience. I was going over relational resilience with them, and he explained to me that the number one goal of boot camp is relational resilience. Is if the soldiers have this interdependence with each other when they're in the battle zone, they're more likely to listen, to follow rules, to be there for one another. And they said, we know it's the number one motivational X factor. This is one of the top people in the Army explaining this to me. I'll never forget thinking to myself, the military, the Army has known for like basically 150 years that this relational resilience is the number one X factor that motivates people. But we haven't made sure every child in this country has access to relational resilience. So again, there's incredible amount of research behind relational resilience, and COVID really bears that out. I mean, there is no debate anymore how we need each other, that we're highly social creatures. When we put so many people, when almost the whole world went into isolation a little bit, it had a huge impact on mental health. We need each other. That debate is over. The next place that resilience comes from internally is something called street resilience. And that is where you use, let me pull this up here. You take the pain of disrespect, social inequality, and mistakes and use it as fuel to propel you forward. So use any type of disrespect. Human beings will disrespect each other over shoe size, height, weight, what kind of glasses we wear, your teeth aren't white enough, belief system, culture. There is no shortage of things we come up with to say, I'm up here, you're down here, I'm more superior, you're less superior. And when we started looking at literally thousands of people who are highly resilient, especially kids with a lot of trauma, all of them talked about taking disrespect and using it as fuel to put one foot in front of another to prove people wrong. I was told I couldn't go to college because of my learning disabilities. Today I'm in 3 college textbooks, and they told me I shouldn't even be on a college campus. And so I used that disrespect and having learning disabilities, and then being 28 years old and never making over $6 an hour. I was illiterate when I was 17 years old. The ability to use disrespect is a reason to prove people wrong is a huge motivational factor. And I teach kids, look, you just got to make sure you don't use it in malicious ways. At 50 now, I never use my street resilience to disrespect another person. I use it as inner motivation for myself. And you use, inequality and mistakes, to be human is the mess up, which I was talking about earlier. And one of the number one things that kills our resilience is if we don't forgive ourselves. When our head hits the pillow at night, if we're focused on what's wrong with ourselves, we're much less likely to bounce back, to be resilient. So one of the key ingredients to being resilient is to give ourselves grace first. I end my book, The Resilience Breakthrough, with a chapter on self-grace. And we have to give ourselves grace first. And then we're much, much more likely to be resilient. So again, the number one thing that will kill your resilience is focusing on what's wrong with yourself. Don't worry, there'll be no shortage of people who will do that for you. You never need to do that to yourself. You convert the pain to the energy to create productive outcomes. You direct your hurt and anger towards a cause rather than an individual. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers is a powerful example of that. I've already talked about Mandela. Rosa Parks refusing to sit on the back of the bus is a powerful, powerful example of street resilience. Because of time, I'm going to jump into the next 2 real quick here. And by the way, you guys are getting a Reader's Digest version of this, but Jason will share with you ways you can access this more in depth and stuff in just a couple minutes. And let me pull up here for you resource and rock bottom resilience. On resource resilience, I'm going to use a picture here. Let me go back out here. I'm going to use a picture here that can really describe resource resilience in 30 seconds. It's a picture of my hero right here, a guy named Kyle Maynard. So resource resilience is just maximizing your talents, your abilities, the resources around you. We know for people to be resilient, they cannot be resilient on an island. You have to access as many resources as you can. For example, when I was growing up, I had 2 talents. I could talk nonstop and I could draw really good. So, today I make a living by taking everything in mental health, making it visual, and talking nonstop. Again, when I was a kid, they sent me to the principal's office in Maryland that had corporal punishment, and they would beat me with a wood paddle, literally, for my nonstop speaking. Today, I realized the principal should have put the wood paddle down and explained to me, hey, Christian, you have conduct disorder. You don't care what other people think about you. And, you're an artist. You're nonstop speaking. The number one fear in the world is public speaking. And, you could actually use that as a resource instead of beating me with a wood paddle. So all the things that got me in trouble as a child is how I make a living today. It's unbelievable. America's the greatest place. And so Kyle Maynard was born with no arms, no legs, just these little stubs. And he wrestled in high school and college. He owns a gym right now in Atlanta. And he recently put rubber balls on the end of his stubs and crawled to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. That's resource resilience. It's just maximizing the reality of where you are, where you're standing. And, he takes his weaknesses, his vulnerabilities, and maximizes them. And that's what resource resilience is about. Because all any of us can do is maximize the resources available to us. Remember, resilience takes place in the striving, and it's putting one foot in front of another with the reality of how much money we do or do not have in the bank. We may have a sick child, our car might be broken down, we have a boss we don't like. Resilience takes place in showing up within that pain and continue to put one foot in front of another. It's the effort effect. It's the striving. It's not a destination. Then the last place that resilience comes from is something called rock bottom resilience. And that's when you have every reason to give up. You put one foot in front of another. You're able to flip that switch. You say to yourself, how do I use this challenge? How do I use this suffering as my best friend? When you're at your lowest point, you believe in your ability to change your circumstances. You refuse to be defined by the negative labels you've been given, whether by yourself or others. You're able to believe in unforeseen options. Now, everybody has a personal rock bottom. The ability to take the biggest challenge in your life. If I was your therapist, I would show you how to take the biggest challenge and use it as a motivator. And because I can't get rid of the pain, the suffering, abuse, violence. Once it's happened, the only thing I know how to do as a mental health worker is show people how to take the anger, the pain, the suffering, and convert it in productive ways. And if you look at this as a model, the first thing you have to be resilient is you have to have suffering. The second thing you have to do is flip the switch. You have to say to yourself, how do I use that suffering as my best friend? You want to be able to tap into as many people around you that can be unconditional. Remember, humans are much more motivated by unconditional love than conditional love. And then we have to be able to tap into both our positive and negative emotions, because every human being all day long is going to have positive and negative emotions. And resilient people maximize the negative emotions. And then you want to be able to tap into that relational resilience. You go through the motions, you put one foot in front of another because of people, you need them and they need you, that interdependence. You got to tap into, you got to use disrespect, hate, disrespect, judgment as a reason to push through. There will always be haters on this planet. There will always be people focused on your deficits. You never need to do that to yourself, but you have to use that as motivation. And the most resilient people talk about being told no, they couldn't accomplish something, no one believed in them, and they kept showing up. That's that street resilience. It's so important. And then the third thing is to maximize our resources around us, our born talents and abilities, and ones we develop throughout our lifetime. And then rock bottom resilience is where you flip that switch you take your own personal rock bottom and you use it as resilience fuel. One of my favorite examples of that is this woman right here, this famous Dorothy Lang photograph during the Great Depression. 6 months after that picture was taken, she still might be living in that tent. Those kids still may be hungry, but that mom did not go on shutdown. I was just been last couple of days, I've been reading more of her story in depth. And she literally did not go on shutdown, made a comeback later in life and just literally worked through some tremendous opposition. But like I say, I don't even have words in the English language to describe the look on her face, but that's rock bottom resilience. She is not going on shutdown. There's so many examples of rock bottom resilience. I want to end with a number 20. Pull it up right here. In the 1992 Olympics, a guy named Derek Redman comes in last place. The winner of this race, very few people remember, but millions and millions of people know who Derek Redman is. You're going to see him flip the switch. He's definitely dealing with some suffering. So look for the suffering. Then he's going to flip the switch. He's going to be on his knees. He tears his hamstring literally off the bone. Like 90% of people would never get up after doing that, but he's this incredible Olympic athlete. So you're going to see him flip the switch. You're going to see the suffering. You're going to see his relational resilience is going to show up. You're going to see his street resilience come out. They're going to ask him to get off the track because he's cutting to Olympic commercial time, which costs millions of dollars. And you're going to see him and his father tap into street resilience. This is his rock bottom moment. And to get to the Olympics, he had to maximize his resources, that resource resilience, had to maximize his talents, his abilities, his physical attributes. And so you're going to see all four sources of resilience, flipping the switch and maximizing suffering. So look for all of these and we'll be done. Again, in the book, The Resilience Breakthrough, we have 27 tools on how to develop your relational resilience, your street resilience resource. And imagine if every student in your school knew how to maximize both their positive, negative emotions, if they knew how to tap into relational resilience, street resilience. What impact would that have on their academics? What impact would that have on how they get along with other people? What impact, most important, would that have throughout their career and their relationships, being a parent, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, in the workplace, when they know how to create a productive outcome? I just spoke to one of the largest corporations in the world about how to maximize, failure, how to maximize our weaknesses in life. And again, multi-billion-dollar company I just shared this with. And a lot of the executives in this billion-dollar company were like, I had no idea what to do with my negative emotions. And so what I'm saying is some of the most successful people on this planet don't even have these tools. And one of the greatest rushes we're having is we're making sure children by third grade know what to do with their negative emotions. So look for all four sources of resilience and we will be done. So I'll play this.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in reverse, and the tears come streaming down your face, when you lose something you can't replace, when you love someone but it goes to waste.
Hey Christian,
Could
can you
it
hear me?
be worse?
Okay, there we go. Okay, you're good. Don't touch anything on it.
Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. to let it go. But if you never try, you'll never know just what you want. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones. I will try to fix you. Tears stream down your face when you lose something you cannot replace. Tears stream down your face.
I'll just cut a little bit short there, but the winner of that race, very, very few people remember, but millions and millions of people know who Derek Redman is. It's because resilience transcends success. I'd rather my two kids, Cooper and Carson, have the ability to get through life's lows, because they're much more likely to have success over the lifespan if they can get through the daily lows of life. And that's one of the goals here, is just to make sure every student has access to evidence-based resilience, and they know exactly where it comes from within. And that's one thing I'm proud of my book, The Resilience Breakthrough. It's the only book on resilience that shows where resilience comes from internally. 90% of stuff out there will only tell you the attributes: hard work, determination, perseverance. And those things are all important. And we spent 25 years teaching those skills in WhyTry. WhyTry are the skills of resilience, but this is where it comes from inside. So it's the combination of evidence-based social emotional education in combination with knowing where resilience comes from within. Those two things have to work together. You guys are my heroes. Thank you so much for devoting your lives to reaching so many students like me. Thanks for all you do. I'll turn the time over to Jason.
Oh my goodness. Great job, Christian. Thank you so much. Sorry to interject there during the video with that. There was a little gray box, so you got it taken care of. Hey, huge round of applause for Christian. I'm going to put up, Christian, if you don't mind, stop sharing, and I'm going to put up, here, I got you. I just swapped it over from mine. I'm going to put up a link, a QR code that you can go to if you're interested. So we have kind of a cool thing we want to do. And Christian is the one that really insisted on doing this. I'm going to put up a QR code that will give you access. If you just point your phone at that, it'll take you to a page where you can put a couple, just answer a couple questions. And then if you'll go through just a brief demo of our model of resilience, we'll give you access to an audio version and an e-version of the book that Christian described. And we're really thrilled to be able to do that. As we conclude, Christian, what I always like to ask our guests is, and I'll just give you this question if you want to share your thoughts on it. What's giving you hope right now? Man, that was an incredible presentation. It definitely struck a chord. We got the chat tool lighting up with people sharing appreciation for Mrs. Jackson and for you telling your story. But this model of resilience, I think, really struck a chord as well. But Christian, parting thoughts, what's giving you hope right now, man? And then I'll give you all some final information on what that QR code can do for you as far as getting the book.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. One of the things that has really stood out to me in the last 6 months is seeing how many people are standing up for each other. And not that they weren't before, but I think what's happened in the last year and a half across this great country is really causing people to go, look, we got to take on issues and situations that we haven't dealt with before. For giving an example, I'm working with a group right now of 150 school administrators that are literally taking on poverty. And they're saying, in the history of education, our job as educators is to deal, of course, with the academics, with education. But I'm working with some administrators in New York City and in many urban environments that have all come together during COVID. And they're like, look, let's really take on these poverty issues. And last couple of months, I've been working with literally school administrators that are putting credit unions in their school. They're literally making sure parents have access to banking that aren't banked. Just some beautiful things that doing this work for 25 years, I've never seen educators at this level stick their neck out and say, look, we're going to make sure kids have access to their basic needs. And, I'm seeing school administrators all across this country putting washer and dryers in their school, food banks in their school, bringing the banking industry into their school, raising money, to you name it. I just see people standing up and sticking their necks out for the most vulnerable populations that in 25 years, I've never seen anything like that. And that has given me major hope, seeing some incredible changes happening across this country in education. And so that's, to me, has me so hopeful right now.
I love that. And that reminds me, and I'm going to key off that. I'll answer my own question as well, as far as what's giving me hope. It really is the educators and the mental health providers. You and I were talking a couple times in the last few days, getting ready for this. And we've been doing this a long time, both through the WhyTry organization, but also professionally, you as a social worker, me as a school psychologist. And when the pandemic hit, I was really curious to see what would happen. And it became very evident very quickly that this wasn't just a little thing. This was a really significant thing. And what I've seen as educators have navigated that, the way they're responding to challenge now, like you said, big, complex challenges that historically have been so vexing and still are problematic. I've seen almost like this renewed effort where educators and mental health professionals are on the front line, really leading out on really, really complex, big things. And it's so inspiring. And I've never been more proud to be part of this family of educators and mental health professionals than I am right now. And that's a tribute to, everybody that's on here with us. So in conclusion, what I want to do, and Christian really pushed hard. He wanted to do this all for you. So Christian outlined at a very kind of abbreviated version, our WhyTry model. The model that he presented with the 4 sources, it actually exists in book form, written to you as grownups. It also exists in a curriculum form that you can deliver to kids. And then we also have it in a format that can be delivered to parents, in a parent guide. And we would love to get especially the book, but also some of the parent resources to you. And then we would love to demo the curriculum for you. So this QR code, that little goofy looking box that keeps coming up on the slides, if you'll point your camera at it, it'll take you to a page where you can answer a couple questions about the webinar. And then if you'll just go through a demo where you take a look at a little bit about some further info on the model Christian presented, then we'll share with you a link and give you a free ebook copy of the book, as well as audio access. It's a great resource if you're looking to kind of go into a deeper dive on this model that Christian presented. And I can attest to it. I've been published on the topic of resilience. This is right on. This is right in line. It is very, very evidence-based.